Now, it might be reasonable to surmise that estate cars were going out of fashion, rendered obsolete to some extent by the advent of the hatchback, which offers the best of both worlds, the compactness of the saloon, plus a door at the back. In fact, the reverse is true. As Europe gets more affluent, the estate market gets more buoyant and more competitive. Everybody wants a slice of it. And these are three new offerings in the small to medium sector. Now, the heart of the matter with estates, of course, is the space, the load carrying capacity. So let's start right there at the back end. Well, this is Ford's contender, the estate version of the new Escort. It's wider and a bit higher than the current model and much longer, and the extra length plus the way they've handled this rear end makes it by far the best looking of the new Escort so far. Now, for some reason, Ford have left the tailgate off the central locking system. So when you arrive at the car with your packages, you have to rummage for your key, which could be a bit annoying. But once you've got the tailgate open, you can see a lot of thought has gone into it. It lifts well out of the way, so no chance of banging your head. It's well contoured, so it doesn't drop rain down the back of your neck. There are no awkward projections around the loading area at all, so it's very easy to get the packages in, and there is more loading capacity than the current Escort estate. Now, the tonneau cover sadly only comes with GLX and gear versions, which is a pity because, of course, estates are vulnerable to prying eyes. You need some sort of cover to hide the goodies, and not very strongly made. I've had the car for a week, already chipped off the corner of the fastening, so rather bad, that. Now, to get those extra boxes in, you've got the standard 60-40 split, which gives you a maximum loading length of 1.7 metres, which is very good for a car of this size. Now, if it's longer or bulkier than that, you're taking the family on holiday, the GLX and gear versions get this neat, aerodynamically designed roof rack with rails to split the roof and adjustable slides. Could be a real boon. OK, now let's drive it. Well, this is the gear version, but even so, the trim is nothing special. But the build quality is very high, the use of space is excellent, both in the front and the rear. I've had my three children in the rear, for example, with all their bits and bobs, no problem at all. And the ride and handling is, if anything, better than the Escort saloon. So the overall impression is quite favourable. But two main quibbles. One is noise. Estates tend to be pretty noisy anyway, but with this car, the engine growls at you at low revs, it becomes raucous at high revs, put on full lock, sounds as if you've got a dog trapped under the wheel. The other is price, because with power steering fitted, you get very little change out of £13,000, and that could be a real problem for Ford. Now, when is a Ford not a Ford? Well, in this particular case, it's when it's a Nissan. The wind tunnel, of course, doesn't know the difference between an Escort estate and a Primera estate. These two have turned out to have a remarkably similar outline. At first glance, anyway, this is the 1.6 LS. In fact, it's considerably bigger than the Escort estate, 4 inches higher, about 8 inches longer. Notice no roof rack, and apparently they don't encourage one. And they've given it a much straighter tailgate line. Now, one of the problems for an estate buyer is getting a decent comparison of different load carrying capacities because they use so many different figures: inches, millimetres, cubic decameters, even litres. It's a real jungle at the very least. You need a pocket calculator. Now, having pressed a lot of buttons, we've come to the conclusion that although the Primera is larger, it actually has slightly less load carrying capacity than the Escort. Now, why is that? Well, in part at least, it's because they've given the rear seat passengers a bit more legroom. But they also handle the rear seat quite differently from Ford. They've split the seat as well as the back. So you've got this very flexible arrangement. You can have 3 people up and a lot of load carrying capacity, or 4 people up and a long load here. And these rear seats also recline. As to its performance on the road, it's certainly well up in its class. The 16-valve engine is very spirited throughout the range and quiet. They've obviously spent a lot of time and effort in dampening out the noise. The ride is impressively smooth. The handling, this is a very easy car to drive well. It's a very solid and stable platform, no doubt in part due to the sophisticated multi-link suspension at the front end. The price, enough to make Ford as sick as a parrot, because it's rumoured to be around £11,500, complete with power steering. If I have a quibble, it is that they don't even offer ABS as an option below 2 litres. Now, the Tempra station wagon from Fiat, this one's from Rome, by the way, so it's left-hand drive, is by far the biggest of the 3 cars we're looking at. In fact, it's really in Sierra and Montego country. It's 6 inches higher, for example, 9 inches longer than the Escort. It's also by far the most distinctive, with this raised rear roofline, although the roof rack looks somewhat rudimentary, perhaps something of an afterthought. Now, this big convex tailgate is somewhat idiosyncratic in that 90% goes up, but 10% goes down. They say it reduces the clearance arc you need at the back end, as well as giving you a low sill for putting in the heavy loads. Now, the boot space on the Tempra is positively cavernous. It's 14% bigger, for example, than the Primera. What's more, the tonneau cover comes as standard, as indeed it should. And I must say I like these boot rails for protecting the carpet. Right. In fact, space is one of the real pluses of this car. It's very roomy in the front and the back, and it's got the same flexible rear seat arrangement as in the Primera. This engine is positively eager all the way up through fifth gear, and the ride is very smooth indeed. Mind you, there's a fair bit of noise, both wind and tyre noise at speed, and Tempra is a leaner. It leans its way through the bend. The price? With the 1.6-litre engine, it's around £11,500, so bang on the nose with Primera. With the 1.8-litre engine, it's around £13,000, so very competitive indeed with the Ford. And the verdict? Well, all three vehicles show just how far estate cars have come over the past couple of years. You've got saloon car performance and sophistication with all that extra load space. The Ford is a very well put together vehicle, spoilt, I think, by the engine and the price. The Tempra is a lot of lively car for the money, and I forgot to mention that 70% of the body is now galvanised for corrosion protection.